Hello everyone, it's Stephen Lund, and today I'm coming at you with a new Blender tutorial. This one will be on creating realistic grass using some hair dynamics and Cycles render engine. We'll be creating the scene you see there, and let's just jump right in. So I'm using the 2.7 release candidate, but depending on when you're watching this tutorial, it may already be released. Let me quick turn on my screen cast so you can see what keys I'm pressing. There we go. So to start, we will just create a small plane and create kind of a miniature scale of our scene to get our materials and dynamics straight before creating a large field of grass, because our frame rate will decrease drastically when we do a large scene. So I'm going to make the resolution of my screen 1280 by 720. And, okay, let's start adding our grass. So this is going to create a new particle system on our plane and change the type to hair. You can see we get really long hair. We're going to choose advanced and make the hair length just like a 0.4. Alrighty. And we will be choosing hair dynamics and adjusting a few settings here. We'll put the stiffness up to 1. We'll bring the spring down to 1. You can see spring is higher values equal more smooth and less jiggly. So 1 I found to be a pretty good number there. We will add some I'm not even going to try and pronounce this, but this is a random amount of particle movement. And select B-spline. And you can see our grass is looking a little bit haywire right now. Why don't we turn our emission number just to 100 for now to make it easier. And I think this should do it. We can add some subframes to get a better animation. And we can also, to make room for less air, let us first put an endpoint to 100. And put the endpoint here to 100. And we can add we can have it so it caches every frame instead of every 10 frames, and this seems to just get less errors and be a more solid solve. So we'll do that. Now let's add some force fields to give some movement to the grass. So we're going to add a force field. We'll start with wind, and we'll rotate this -90 degrees so it's pointing directly in this direction. And we're going to change a few of these settings. Okay, so we're on frame 1 right now, and we're going to give this a strength of about 35, maybe 30. I said 30. And we're going to insert a keyframe here. Now, we can also give it some noise, but what I'm doing here is I want there to be a large amount of variation in the strength of wind, and noise does this, but not enough. And I want a more obvious amount of gusts of wind occasionally, and less just small noise. So I found this to work better. So I'm going to insert a keyframe, and now, I'm going to split my window and change this side to be the graph editor. And with this selected, you'll see over here we have a strength in our field settings. And we're going to hit N to bring up our properties and add a modifier, noise. Now this will add noise, but you can adjust it much more than you can adjust this noise to the strength. So we're going to change our scale. Let me scroll out here. All right, this is our strength here. We're going to change the scale to be something around 30, and then we're going to change the strength to be something around 30. And we can kind of scrub through to see how much variation we're getting. You can see at this point we're down to about a 17, and at this point we're up to about a 40. And this is pretty good. Maybe I'll make it a little bit more, 35, or maybe even 40. So something like that is going to be good. And you can also scrub through and see how many gusts of wind you'll get over your 100 frames of animation. And it looks like this is going to be pretty accurate. So we'll go with that. And one other force field we'll add now is a turbulence force field. And this will just add a bit of randomness so it doesn't look quite like all the grass is moving in unison. We'll give this a size of 5 or something, and maybe give that a little noise as well. Alright, so now we can kind of start seeing what our simulation is going to look like. So at frame 1, let's start playing through and seeing what we get. And you can see that's not too bad. Could use a little bit of work. Okay, so a few things. Back to our particle settings, you can add more segments to give your grass a smoother, less edgy look. That's good. Now let's give it a little bit more mass, and let's give it a little less stiffness. And this is something that you can really just experiment with a lot, but that looks like it's not nearly stiff enough anymore. So let's go back to 1 and try it just with the mass. We don't need this open. We can close that now. And it still looks a little bit dead. Now, one thing you can also do is go to your field weights and turn the gravity off completely. Now this, you can see, kind of takes away some of the realism, so you may not want to go all the way with that. And you can also change the mass up here, which will kind of affect the amount of gravity as well, making it a lighter material. So this is just something you can play with, but I'm going to try adjusting the mass, and you can see a little bit will go a long way. So I'm just going to go like a 0.8. And I'll give it some randomness here as well, just a little bit. You don't want to go too crazy with the grass. And let's see what that looks like. It looks a little bit too heavy. Maybe some more stiffness and a little bit less mass in the hair dynamics. Try that, and that's looking better. So less mass is going to help that look. And you can maybe go even less, 2.5 or 1.5, or 0.15 I should say. And that's not too bad. The stiffness might be a little bit strong because you're not getting too much of that force field look. And you can also play around with the amount of wind. It looks like that's a little bit weak in the wind. You don't want too much, but you don't want too little either. So you can go here and change your keyframe to be something more like 45. We can see what that looks like. And that's not too bad. I kind of like that. Kind of getting the animation a little bit slow. I'd like a little bit more movement, so we can go back and drop the stiffness down even more. Try a 0.3. And that's not too bad. Now with our force field selected, you can also use this flow material, which converts effective force into air velocity. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but experimenting with this will give you some different results sometimes. So it's just another setting that you might want to consider using. Try negative. You can't go negative, but yeah, you could experiment with this and get some different looking results. I think I'll leave it at 1 for now, though. And, whoop, sorry about that. And it looks like I didn't change my strength like I meant to. You have to hit I, and I think I didn't hit that. So hit I on your strength, and now it's 45. And now you can see we're getting more wind effect on that. And maybe even give it some more turbulence strength. So go 35. It all depends on how much wind you want in your scene. But, that's not too bad looking. It's a little bit weak in the amount of wind, but like I said, you can play with it and create it however you like. I'm pretty happy with this. Maybe we'll just go a little bit less stiffness, but I am pretty happy with this now. Okay. So one more check over our settings. Another thing you can do is add some random length to your grass, which will give it some more realism. So using this random here, we can go like a 0.3, 0.7 or something like that. And you can give it a little bit more steps in the B-spline here as well. But that is not that's not terrible. So let's start working on our materials. So first we need to set up our light. So let's grab our lamp up here, and let's switch over to Cycles Render up on top here. Change your lamp to sun, and let's snap our camera to our front view. So with our camera in front view, hit Alt-Control-0, and that will snap the camera to your viewport. And now we can kind of position our camera how it might be when we're ready for it. It will probably be moved a little bit when we make our scene larger. But now we can take our lamp and rotate it to the angle we want approximately. Something like this, I think, will work well. Rotate a little bit more and click Use Nodes and change the strength to be, or down here, change the strength to be like a 12 and give it a slight orange tinge because the sun is always a little bit orange looking. Especially if it's later afternoon sun, so you can play with this depending on what time it is in your scene. But you can also check Multiply Important Sample, which can help with glossy materials. Okay, so for the materials on the grass. First, we're going to be having a material for the ground, so we're going to need to create one material, name this one ground, and we'll create one more material and name this one grass. Now for the particle system to use the second material, we'll have to go to our particle settings and select the grass material. Alright, now we can split our window and pull up our node editor. Turn off our materials tab with N and our toolbar. And we can switch to rendered viewport shading. Now, first off, we'll set up the shapes of the grass. And then we can set up the materials. So to set the shape, we will go to the bottom of our particle tab, and we have Cycles Hair Rendering here. Now let me quick change over to GPU rendering. I may have to quick enable this in my user preferences, but I want to use my GPU because it renders faster. So doing that, I can set it to GPU. And now we got a few different settings here. I believe line segments, curve segments. Curve segments will obviously give you a better look, but this will take longer to render, so this is going to be up to your preference. And you can also do triangles. But for now, I'm going to leave it at line segments. I might change it to curve segments depending how it looks later. Now for the shape of our material, the shape basically adjusts the curve, you could say, to the strand. And I have a little graph here that I got off the Blender wiki. And this right here has a shape of 1. And you can see that it gets real pointed by the end. And this here has a shape of -1. And you can see that it is very rounded by the end. Now, I think a blade of grass is leaning more towards this shape, from what I've seen, than this shape. So I'm going to turn my shape to be about a -0.4, and that will just give a little bit better of a look. And we do not want our tip closed. We will uncheck, this, and change our tip to be about a 0.01, and our root to be about a 0.05. Well, that's way too small. Hang on. We'll go 0.1. And that's still too big. We'll go 0.3. And then we'll go 0.1. This will depend on the scale of your scene, obviously. But I like to have the tip be about half of, or maybe even less, about a third of the base. So something like this may look good, and we might want to increase the scaling up a little bit and this will increase like the overall scale of the whole scene. So yeah, this isn't too bad. We'll probably change when we get to our materials, but for now this might work good. Now with curved segments selected, you may be able to turn these segments, these segments down a little bit. Okay, this is needs to be recached, I believe. So I'm going to turn back to solid and recache this. But if you have curved segments, I believe you can probably turn these segments down a little bit. So why don't we try that and play our animation through. You can see we get a grass blowing, and then we can try rendering it again, and that doesn't look too bad. We'll go with that for the moment, I guess. Now, one other thing we're going to do is enable children. This is how we get a much fuller looking field of grass. So on children, select simple, and you can see that we get a whole bunch more blades, and these blades are basically added to every individual blade. You get another 10, or actually 100 if you render it, but I'm going to change this to just 35 or so right now. Now we want to put our clumping way down, almost all the way down, and you can see we get like these bunches of grass then, where it has kind of one root but all the blades coming out of that, and that gives you a much more realistic look. And then we can adjust the radius, which will give you a larger clump of grass essentially, and the roundness, just giving you some different looks. And scale doesn't really change anything. You can change the size. Some of these don't really affect this scene in general. But and then the shape, you can go down a little bit on too. And that looks pretty good. Now I think our grass is a little bit long. This will again depend on your scene. But for me, I'm going to change my emitter down, and then my hair length down. You can change it right here, and you can change it right here. But I prefer to leave this at 1. So I'm going to change it up here. So we'll just go down to 0.1, and let's recache that in. And let's put our emitter back. I think I messed up changing that. We don't want to change that right now. Okay. And there we go. Now our wind might be a little bit strong, but like I said, you can adjust this how you want. So now that we have a little bit more grass here to look at, we can start putting our materials on. So I'm switching to rendered, and you can see that it's starting to go a lot slower already. So I may want to just quick turn the children off completely while I am doing this. So just turn the display down to 0. And another thing is you can change your camera settings. My focal length, I like to use like an 18, and you can choose a camera in the settings here. I'm gonna go with this one. It's a Canon lens sensor. So, alright, so setting up our camera, grabbing, hitting middle mouse button makes you be allowed to zoom in. Let us do our materials now. Make sure we have our grass selected. We are going to use our diffuse shader, and I'm going to add a input hair info. So we have a few settings here, and we're going to do a Shift A, add a color ramp. And now intercept is what we're going to use because this measures the strand essentially. So now we can use these sliders to manipulate the color along the whole strand. So basically, look at this as your blade of grass, this being the base and this being the tip. Now, I'm going to take the black color and kind of give it a deader looking green, something like that. And now, holding control, I'm going to add another slider in right here and give this kind of a deeper looking green. These are just colors I've kind of studied grass a little bit and noticed kind of a pattern of how they grow. And the base is always a little deader looking. Then you have kind of a deeper looking green. And the blade normally gets a little bit lighter by the top. So we'll go something like this. That might be too much. And then the very tip is always a little bit dead, like it hits the sun and gets the most sun and stuff, and this is normally a little bit more of a tan color, so something like that will look good. And these will probably be played with a little bit, but this will work well to get started. So let's give ourselves a little bit more room now and put the color into the diffuse. Now we're going to be adding some translucency. So add shader, a translucent shader, and add a add shader. And let's give ourselves a little bit more room here because we're going to have to add a glossy shader in here too. But give the translucent shader the same color as the grass and plug this in with the add shader and the diffuse. Now we're going to add a mix shader, plug this in between the diffuse and add, and a glossy shader. Now the glossy shader will go in the bottom, and we'll give this just like a 0.1 glossiness, and we'll adjust our glossy roughness to be more of a 0.1 as well. And this is kind of a good just to start with, and this can be tweaked as well. So let's see what this is looking like when we render it, and I'm not seeing anything at the moment, so that's no good. But let me quick save this file. So I'm going to go save as and just quick put this on my desktop in my grass tutorial. I'll name this just tutorial. Good. So let's troubleshoot this a little bit. We have our strand info plugged into our color ramp and plugged into our diffuse translucent. I do not think it is an issue with the material. So it's basically rendering 100% invisible. Let us see if it has anything to do with the scaling. It doesn't seem like that's the issue. And what if we do just a normal F12 render? You can see that's rendering now. So something's messed up in the viewport. I'm not quite sure what's going on there right now. But this is a release candidate version of Blender, so a few things may not be working correctly right now. I'm going to change the under performance. I'm going to give my GPU a larger tile size. So I'm going to go 256 by 256. And it's a bummer that this isn't working because that really speeds up our process. But we might be able to get by just using a normal render. So you can see that our grass is looking a little bit on the large side of things. So we may want to turn the size down a little bit, but it's not too bad. So I think I'll stay with that for now, and let us just move on with our scene. So I'm pretty happy with that. Let's pull our camera back now and raise her up a little bit. And this plane that we have our grass on, we're going to change into our field now. So to speed things up, I'm just going to turn off the particle system. I'm going to scale the scene up to be about a, let me see, 7 or so. And going to hit tab and add a handful of subdivisions to it. And I'm going to add a subsurf modifier and a displacement modifier. And I'm actually going to use 2 displacement modifiers, so I'm just going to put those in twice. Now on our first displacement modifier right here, we can collapse our subsurf for the moment, turn the views up a little bit on that. On our first displacement, I'm going to go new texture, and you can see we get this crazy look. But if we first just change the strength way down to like a 0.1, and then switch to our texture tab, you can see under its displace, we want to choose displace texture right here. And we have our cloud texture right now. This is good. This is exactly what we want. So we can change the scale of it. And why don't we quick turn off our second displacement, because that's kind of hindering our view. We can enable smooth shading right here. And we basically want this modifier to be our larger bumps. So let's name this large bumps. And change the scale up a bit larger. And we don't need too much depth in this one. And you can change the scale, the strength a little bit here as well. Not too much, don't go crazy. But something that will look like realistic little hills. Maybe change this scale up a little bit larger as well. So that's pretty good. And now we are going to create one more displacement texture. I'm going to hit new. We're going to select, I think it's this one, and hit the 2 box here to make it single user. And we're going to change this to be small bumps. Alright, and the scale of this is going to be much smaller, like a 1.5. Or even smaller. Make it real small. Now, that's a little too small. Just go a 0.1 and give it some depth. And now we have to change this back to our large bumps. And we can change this one back to our small bumps. And hang on. Large bumps, small bumps. Okay. So we can turn the eye back on this one now and change our strength way down. So we get these little bumps. We'll just go at 0.01. Maybe a little bit more than that. 0.03. You can see we get a little bit more detail now in our terrain. We may be able to change the scale down a little bit too on our small bumps. So change our size to like a 0.04. And it looks like I changed, and when you change that, it changes this here as well, so we gotta put that back. But something like that is pretty good. Kind of play around with it and come up with whatever you like, but I'm pretty happy with that. We can pull our camera out a little bit now. And, alright, so why don't we, hang on, let me make my window bigger here. Why don't we scale this up a little bit more, just so it's kind of filling in our grid floor here. And with that done, we can add our grass across the whole plane now. So let's turn our grass back on, and you can see it's just very few. And this is when it's going to test your computer a little bit to see how many blades you want to render and the size of your scene and whatnot. But I think I did like a 5,000 in my scene, and it definitely slowed down my computer a bit, so I think I might go a little bit less for the sake of this tutorial. I think I'll change it to be about 2,000 maybe, or 200,000. I'll start with that, and that doesn't look too bad. We may be able to get by with a 100,000, but that looks okay, so I'm going to save that there. And one thing to set up the composition of our scene, we'll go to our camera and turn on thirds. And in my scene, I kind of had the grass level be 2/3 of the scene and the sky level be the last third. So with my camera selected, I'm going to rotate along the X and kind of get that grass along this third line here, just overhanging a little bit like that. And why don't we enable children again by the display here. You can put as many as you want. I'm going to have it render about 30, but I'm only going to have it display. I'm not going to have it display any actually. Maybe just 5, just so you can kind of see how it's going to look. But I think the length of my grass might be a little bit too long as well right now. So I'm going to go up to my hair length, bring this down to like a 0.2. We got to cache it. But now we have all of our grass there and stuff, we can bake it. So just go to frame 1. You can see we have 0 frames in cache. That's good. Let's put our emitter back to 1 here. And with our hair length, hey, change. Okay. Oh, it's changing this down here, I see. That may or may not be okay. Let us kind of see. We don't have enough frame rate to do that right now. It seems like when I'm changing this setting, it's changing this setting. And I don't know I don't know if that's a bug or not, but it's a little bit curious. I guess we'll just leave it at that for now, and let's hit bake. Now this may take a little while. I'm at a point, I'm at 4 or 5 right now, so I'm going to pause the recording and let this finish and be back with you in a little bit. It should only be a few minutes, so I'll be right back in a sec. Okay, I'm back, and that took just about a minute or two, so not too bad. And we have one more task to do, and that is materializing the ground and adding another varying amount of grass, kind of a deader grass look. So with this baked, we can kind of scrub through and see what it's looking like. It's not too bad. We might want to raise our camera up a little bit, but it's not too bad looking right now. The grass might be a little bit long, but like I said, it's going to depend on what you want. And you can also, like I said before, adjust the length here, so we can kind of chop her back a little bit there maybe. So that should be good. And let's rotate her down a little. Whoa. The camera. Did I? Okay, yeah. Just the camera. Rotate them down a little bit more. So let us turn off the grass on the plane right now, so we can add our material. So go into the top view, hit tab, and U unwrap. So we have this whole thing unwrapped nicely. We're going to switch to our material tab and grab our ground texture and shift add an image texture. Now I'm going to use a dead ground kind of look, and here, let me quick bring up my web browser. Just jump over to CG Textures and type in like, I think it's like a dead leaves texture that I used. Any of these would probably work. You can grab this one or this one, and this will work nicely as a ground underneath the grass. So grab any of those textures, and also while you're at it, just type in free HDR maps, and you'll come up with this as your like first result or something. And nice website to get some free HDR sets for realistic lighting. I believe the one I have downloaded is, let me just scroll down a little bit here. The one I downloaded, I believe, is a actually like a skateboarding park or something. Probably went right by it. And it's right here. NT State Park. So go ahead and download that. It's an 18 megabyte file. And back over to Blender now, we can open up our texture, and let me quick jump to my CG Textures folder and grab let me see which one it is. This one here, Leaves Dead 05, and connect it to the diffuse color there. And we need to add an input texture coordinate and a vector mapping node. And we're going to choose UV out of our texture coordinate here. Hang on, grab that and plug it into the vector, and grab that and plug it into the image texture. Connect the mapping with the image texture. So now if we go to rendered viewport, you can see we have this image mapped onto our ground, but we want this to be repeated quite a few times to get a lot of little detail in there. So to do this, I'm going to change the scale up to be about a 30, I think, or 20, and do that on the X, Y, and Z. And if you zoom in here now, you can see we have that texture repeated over and over on our ground, which, if you go into camera view, should look kind of like this, which is perfect. It might even be a little bit more than we need, but I'm gonna stay with that for now. So that is good. And now to add some variation to the color of our grass, I'm going to grab these three nodes right here and scroll over here and click this button, which is going to copy them to the clipboard. Now if we grab our grass texture, I'm going to click paste, and put these nodes up here, like this. Now what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of this color to the grass. And to do this, since our ground is already UV unwrapped and stuff, if I just add a color mix node and plug it in here, and connect this to that too, I can mix this ground texture into the grass texture a little bit by putting it into the bottom node here and just turning it to like a 0.2 or something. Now when we let's just save. Now when we look at our grass shader, let me just excuse me, move this over a little bit, and now if we turn our grass on, we can do a test render and then see how she's looking. So I'm just gonna save this. Once you have it baked, it's a little larger file to save. I'm not getting any grass over here. What is going on with this? It looks like our grass didn't get baked on our hill. And that might be because our subsurf is below our particle system. So why don't we try, I think I need to rebake this. Why don't we move our particle system down underneath our displacement maps and subsurf. And why don't we try rebaking this? So this will be another minute or so, but there's, oh, it looks like it's on it there. Then it just jumps down. So yeah, I think this might need to be rebaked now with this changed. So to do this, we'll just have to click free bake, and you can see we still have 100 frames in the cache. So on frame 1, if you just kind of reset a setting by like clicking that and hitting return or something, or not that one, let's just do that, and you can see our bar is gone and there's 0 frames in cache, which is good. So now we'll just click bake again and wait for this to finish. Okay, we're back and we have this baked nicely, and you can see it is now mapped across our floor like it's supposed to. So that's good. Now, why don't we, before we render, why don't we set up our background image? So I'm going to go to the layer below, and under your nodes, you switch over to your world settings here. And over here in our world settings as well, we can go image texture, and then, no, I'm sorry, environment texture, and then we can open up our image texture. Now, I had showed you earlier the texture to download, but I think I was incorrect on that. I said the skate park one, but I didn't actually use this one for my scene. You may be able to use this one, but the one I actually used in my scene is, scrub down here a little bit. The one I used is actually Lake Overlook, but had, I think it's this one, maybe this one. But it actually has some trees in it. So here, I'll just show you the one I used. So let me quick grab this image here. And we'll grab this one. So if I switch to rendered viewport, you can see it back here now. Now this is, yeah, kind of a docky area. Let me see, I'm sure I can point out which one it is in here if you want to get the exact one I used. Just going to scroll down and, let me see here. I don't see it. Is it down further? No. Don't see it here. This one right here, Hudson River, I believe is the one I used. So download this one, and it should be this texture here. So yeah, you can. I think I actually might have opened up the big one is this one, which is probably going to give you better results like that. So open up your environment texture, and we're going to have to add a texture coordinate node and another mapping node. Connect this one, this time using generated out of the texture coordinates to here. And let me quick change. I think my screencast keys. Okay, that's still good. That's still good. All right, and then connect this to the environment texture. Now we can kind of scroll around our scene with these coordinates and position it how we want. So I'm going to kind of rotate. Whoop, this is the location. I want to rotate along the Z a little bit here. Kind of getting this tree in this left portion. And then I'm going to rotate along the, which is it? Not the Y, but the X. To kind of position it along the, and I may have to rotate this a little bit too. Like so. And then you can see this dotted line here is where the grass is going to end. So I need to rotate more along the X here. Less along the X. And a little bit on the Y. Now, this is just going to be a little bit of trial and error until you get it right. But and you can also change the scale. Not this one. But, the location along the Y. You go in the negative a little bit, and it kind of zooms out a little bit. Now, you may not want to do this if you're doing a lot of animating on your scene, but I was able to get away with doing some of this to kind of get more trees in my shot. So, rotate that like that, and we'll use that for the moment. It might zoom out a little bit more, maybe like that. And then, yeah, just kind of position that tree in the left portion of your scene. So that's not too bad. I kind of like that. Why don't we do a render now? First, we're going to quick do a few render layers here. This render layer here is going to be our grass. And we're going to add a new one. And this one is going to be our background. And I spelled that wrong. Background. Like so. And our grass is going to be this layer. And our background is going to be this layer. And what we need to also do is select mask layer, and we're going to choose the grass layer under our background. This will give us the grass basically masked out, so we can just add this layer on top of the grass layer. So with that set up, we should be able to do a render now. Let me quick adjust my samples. I'll render this at 100 samples. Save my scene, and select both layers. Here, let me turn off rendered viewport here. Select both my layers, and we'll do a test render now and see where we're at. So hit F12 and pause the recording, and be back with you when this is rendered. Okay guys, I paused the recording because you can see I'm getting this hilarious looking grass right now, and it's also rendering extremely slow. I needed to change my children down to 15 just to get her to start rendering, so I think I have a few things set a little bit overkill right now. So, first under our strand settings, here, let me see if I can't go to rendered viewport. Is this still not working? This is kind of strange. I think that has to do with this release candidate version that is not working at the moment, because I have been able, oh, and it just crashed on me. Alright, we're back, and I think I missed a few settings down here. The curve subdivisions looks like it's set way too high right now. And I don't even know if I want to use a curve right now, because it seems like it's just rendering a little bit too slow. So I'm just going to change it to line segments. I think that's what I used in my scene, and it didn't look too bad. If you want better results, you can do curve segments and turn your subdivisions down and maybe get away with that, but for now I'm just going to use line segments. And our scaling was way too large, so I'm going to turn this way down right now. We'll just go like 0.005, and we'll see what this looks like. So I'm going to hit F12 one more time, and we'll see how this looks. Okay, we're back, and this render is much better looking. It only took two minutes to render, 2.5 minutes to render, and you can see it's much better looking. A few things could be adjusted. I think the grass is still a little bit large, so we'll change a few of these things. Maybe go down to 0.4 here, and maybe make the tip just a tad. Maybe we can make the shape a little bit more severe, -0.5, and just tweak things a little bit. And you might want to raise the trees up a little bit in the background too, but that's not too bad. So let's get into our compositor and composite up the scene. One thing I forgot to do is we want to add some depth of field and some mist to our scene. So with our camera selected, check limits and mist here, and using the distance here, we can adjust where our focal length is. This plus signal is our focal length. So we're just going to set this to be pretty shallow towards the beginning of our field of grass right here. And that looks pretty accurate. And we're going to change our aperture type to be f-stop and give it about a f2. And just like a number like 9 for the blades, and rotation doesn't really matter for that. Now, selecting our world settings and going to our layers first, actually, we can choose mist, and then we can change how our mist starts and ends under our world settings. So you can see the reason I enabled that feature setting mist earlier is now you can see, if I go into wireframe, you can see it better. This yellow bar here is the start and end points to our mist. So we're going to make it start a little bit sooner, switching to about a 2. And we're going to make it end a bit sooner too, going about 15. So that should look a bit better now. I need to quick re-render this with these settings changed, and I'll be right back. Alright, we're back with those few settings changed. You can see we have some nice focal length going on here. The grass is nice and blurry in the background and sharp in the foreground. So we just got a little bit of compositing to do now to finish up this tutorial. So I'm going to switch to my compositor and click Use Nodes and Backdrop. And you can turn my properties off there. And Control-Shift will add in a viewer node so I can see what I'm doing. That's good. You can see we have this mist option here now. I'm going to Shift add a color mix, plug this in right there, so it's in with the viewer node. And the factor is going to be the mist. So you can see the mist is applied across here now. And I'm going to give this kind of a light blue look. And this is way too strong right now. So I'm going to duplicate this mix node and plug this image in the bottom. So I can now control the amount of mist with this factor here. Now, if there's too much mist in the background, like you can see, this is a little bit unrealistically blue, but I kind of like it on the grass. That is why I rendered out 2 layers, one being the background. You can now choose your background layer here, add in another mix node, and change this to add. And so we can take our background and add this to this and adjust the and let me flip this around here. Whoop, that didn't work. Alright, so how did that? You can see that adds some more, it basically adds this on top of it, which can be good for, you know, getting a better, realisticer looking amount of mist to the background, although it would be better if I could mix. Is that working too? Mixing seems to be... Oh, no, mixing isn't going to work. Do I have an alpha, though? That's what I want to know. No? Alright, so you can add this on top, depending if you want to or not. It's not really necessary. I kind of like the amount of mist I have. But, yeah. You don't really need this step if you're not going to have a whole lot of mist in your scene. So for this tutorial, I'm not going to use this. I did use this in my final scene, but you don't need that step. You can just turn the mist down a little bit if it's overpowering on the background. So that's basically it. I just added a little bit of a color balancing then. And I also added a vignette, but I've shown you guys how to do that a few times now, so it's not essential for this tutorial. But yeah, color balance node, give it a little bit of a blue in the lift and a little bit of a yellow in the gain. This is what I like to do on most of my scenes. You can turn the factor down a little bit, but you can see how that looks compared to that and that, and it's a much better looking result. But yeah, that's the basics of it, guys. And you can render out an animation and animate the camera and etc. like I did. But that's basically it. And I hope you guys learned something from this, and I would love to see your guys' grass scenes, so post them in the comments below. And if you have any suggestions for future tutorials, you can find my Facebook page in the description below, and leave me a message for a request or something on a tutorial you might want, or you could leave it in the comments below. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. If you liked, leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Bye bye.